I didn't rush inside. I just stood in the driveway with the engine running, the driver's side door cracked open, and the dome light casting this soft orange over the empty passenger seat. I'd been gone all day. 14 hours. Not even the kind of day you brag about. Just endless inventory checks, busted shipments, overtime nobody asked for, and a broken vending machine that decided to swallow my last dollar. When I finally stepped out of the truck, the air smelled like wet concrete and rosemary. That's what struck me first. Rosemary. My wife hated it. Always said it reminded her of her grandmother's funeral. But there it was, strong, warm, cooking inside my house. And I knew immediately. It wasn't one of those slow gut feelings that grow in the back of your mind and take weeks to bloom. No, this hit me like a clean, cold slap. That scent didn't belong to us. She'd never cook with rosemary. Not unless someone else was here. Someone else who liked it. I moved toward the front door quietly. There was a rhythm to the way I walked, as if my feet already knew what I was about to see. I wasn't being dramatic. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't trying to catch them. I was confirming something. Something that had started with little things. A month ago, our laundry smelled different. She said it was a new detergent, but the scent was familiar, like a memory with teeth. It reminded me of a hotel in Flagstaff we stayed at for a wedding 2 years ago. I didn't say anything then. Why would I? Then it was the coffee. She stopped drinking it how she used to, black, 2 sugars, and started using oat milk. The brand her ex always talked about when he came up in stories from her wild years. Again, small, invisible to most, but not to me. And last week, I found a boot print in the garage. One I didn't recognize. She said it must have been the plumber. We haven't had plumbing issues since last March. The front door was unlocked. That's all I needed. I opened it slow, not creeping, just measured, like someone testing the weight of a moment before stepping fully into it. The lights were on, all of them, which was strange. She usually dimmed everything at night. Said it helped her sleep. Tonight, it looked like someone was filming a cooking show in our kitchen. Bright, too bright, and silent. But I didn't see her at first. I saw the living room, the couch, a throw blanket, one I hadn't seen before, balled up on the floor next to 2 empty glasses. One had a slice of lemon floating in the melted ice. She hates lemon in drinks. Always says it tastes like wet perfume. Still no voices. No footsteps. Then I heard it. A laugh. Not hers. His. I recognized it from a video she once showed me. A stupid Facebook clip of her college friends at a lake house. Her ex had laughed in the background, loud and proud, like he thought the world was in on his joke. She laughed too, back then. And tonight, that same laugh echoed from down the hall. I walked slowly down that hallway, passing the framed pictures she insisted we hang. Our wedding. The trip to Sedona. The girls at Halloween. I paused at the last one, us at the beach. I noticed something I hadn't before. Her hand wasn't on my back in that photo. It was near me, sure, but not touching, like a pose held together by obligation. I didn't open the bedroom door. I didn't need to. It was wide open. And what I saw wasn't lust or passion or heat. It was familiarity. My wife, kneeling on the floor, laughing, handing him something from my nightstand. Something small. A watch. My watch. She wasn't flustered or guilty. She was comfortable. Casual. Like they were roommates splitting chores. And then came the sound I will never forget. "Daddy's home," my youngest whispered, standing at the end of the hallway. Her voice wasn't scared. It wasn't even surprised. It was resigned. Like this had happened before. She didn't run to me. Didn't say hi. Just stared at me and then said it, slow and clear. "He's the real man now." I looked at her for a long moment. Then at the 2 shadows in the bedroom. Then back at her. I didn't speak. I just smiled. It wasn't a smile meant for them. It was for me. The kind you wear when something inside you clicks, like a gear shifting into place. I turned, walked past the pictures, past the rosemary, out the door, and drove. Not fast, not wild, just far. I left everything behind. The house, the keys, even the wallet, but not before making sure one thing stayed behind. Something only I knew was there. And that's what they never saw coming. I didn't go to a hotel. That's what they'll assume later, that I grabbed a room somewhere, drank myself stupid, stared at a ceiling fan like some pitiful country song. No, I went to the last place anyone would think to look for me, the storage unit off Route 19, the one I kept under my uncle's name, the one with no cameras, no gate logs, and no one who asked questions, because I paid them to never ask questions. Inside, it was cool, silent, and packed with the kind of things most men don't admit they keep. Old hardware tools, 3 boxes of family photos I'd scanned but never framed, and a black duffel bag I hadn't touched in 4 years. That bag held everything they thought I'd forgotten. See, I wasn't the type to write poetry about betrayal or scream into the wind about heartbreak. I catalog things. I log. I analyze patterns. And for the last 10 months, something about her behavior had been off. Not in the dramatic sense, not movie level, but in the margins. And I live in the margins. 10 months ago, she started sleeping with her legs pointed toward the edge of the bed, not the center like she used to. 8 months ago, she turned off the Find My Phone setting and said it was draining battery. 5 months ago, our oldest started drawing pictures that had a man in them, tall, square-jawed, wearing a camp shirt. Her ex always wore those cheap button-ups. Always. I had written none of this down, but it was filed in the dry, silent warehouse of my memory. And I'd been waiting. That black bag had a hard drive in it. Not a fancy one. Not even new. Just 1 terabyte of dull, emotionless footage, door cams, old baby monitors I repurposed, motion-activated sound clips. All timed. All cataloged. All ignored until now. Back in that unit, I pulled out my laptop, connected the drive, and waited as the folders loaded. October 3rd, 3:42 p.m., window cam _2. Her ex's car parked down the street. He walked the rest of the way, slipped through the back gate. She met him barefoot, hugged him for 13 seconds. 13. Not a polite 5-second family hug. Not a sultry, romantic wraparound. No, 13 seconds. That's the hug of people who think they've earned something. Like they're owed it. November 18th, 9:14 p.m., living room cam _1. He cooked. She drank. My youngest danced around the kitchen. He picked her up like she was his. My wife giggled. They kissed over the stove. There were dozens more. Enough to build a timeline, a pattern, a story. But it wasn't the cheating that broke me. Not the physical part. I was already past that. It was what happened on Christmas morning. December 25th, 7:08 a.m., hallway audio _4. My daughter's unwrapped gifts. Laughed. She told them, "Don't wake Daddy. Let him sleep. This is our morning. Our morning." I remember that day. She brought me cold coffee and said they started early because the girls were too excited. Lied straight into my face with the fake smile of someone who'd already divided the house in two and picked her side. I didn't watch more. I didn't need to. I already had enough. Not for court, not for drama, but for something better. Leverage. Not in the legal sense. In the psychological sense. The kind that eats people from the inside. The kind that leaves no fingerprints, no traceable threats, just doubt. Paranoia. Guilt so quiet it sounds like their own conscience. I leaned back against the cold metal wall of the unit and closed my eyes. This wasn't about rage anymore. It wasn't even about sadness. It was about rebalancing the scales. Because I knew something she didn't. My daughters still had bedtime stories saved on their tablets, recordings I made when they were 3 and 4, with silly voices and made-up adventures. And in those recordings, I always ended with the same line. No matter what happens, Daddy always keeps his promises. And I was just getting started. The next morning, the sun cut through the windshield like a scalpel. I hadn't slept, didn't try to. I sat upright in the truck parked just outside the unit, replaying her voice in my head over and over. Let him sleep. This is our morning. Every time I heard it, it calcified something inside me, hardened it. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I hadn't left in shame. I left to become the ghost they never accounted for. At 7:03 a.m., my phone finally buzzed. Then again. Then 28 more times in less than 10 minutes. All from her. All variations of the same desperate plea. Where are you? Please call me. The girls are asking. It wasn't what it looked like. She didn't even know what I had seen. That was the first crack in her story. She was trying to apologize for something without knowing which version of the lie I'd caught. She didn't know if I saw them in the bedroom, the kitchen, or the hallway. She didn't even know how long I'd been standing there. That's when people make mistakes. When their damage control starts ahead of the disaster. By 8:12 a.m., I got a message from her sister, Dana. That one almost made me laugh. Dana never liked me. Claimed I was too observant and creepily calm. She once told my wife, in front of me, that being married to me must feel like living next door to a sleeping bear. I never forgot that. Dana's message was short. She's a mess. Just come home. For the girls. For the girls. They were already calling him the real man, Dana. But I didn't reply. I had something better planned. At 9 a.m., I drove to a small antique shop 2 towns over, run by a man named Edwin. He was in his 70s, had the voice of a jazz radio host and the memory of a hard drive. He owed me a favor. 2, actually. I traded him an old wrench set for access to a vintage wire recorder, the kind used in the 50s for covert surveillance. It wasn't about functionality. It was about style. There's something deeply unnerving about hearing your own betrayal played back on a machine so analog it creaks while it runs. Like history itself is judging you. From there, I went home. Not inside. Just near. I parked a block away, downwind from our backyard. Watched through a pair of binoculars I once used for scouting trails. She was pacing in the kitchen, phone to her ear, crying into her hand, still wearing the same shirt from the night before. The one with the cartoon otter on it. She always wore it when she wanted to feel cozy. He wasn't there anymore. That was interesting. She hadn't sent a single message about him. Not one apology explaining his presence. That meant she was still protecting him. Noted. Then I spotted the second shift in the air. Our youngest on the porch, sitting with a juice box, swinging her feet, looking disappointed. Not sad. Just let down. Like the magic trick they rehearsed fell flat. That's when I made the first drop. I left a package on the back doorstep. Small. No return label. No note. Just the wire recorder, turned on, playing a 10-second loop of her ex's laugh, the same one from the hallway on the night I walked out. On repeat. Then I rang the doorbell and walked away before the door even creaked open. I didn't watch her reaction. That wasn't the point. The point was to make her unsure of what I had, of how I had it, and when I might strike again. That night, she didn't message me at all. Instead, I got a message from a blocked number. One sentence. What do you want? Bingo. He was in it now. What do I want? That's the thing. They never stopped to consider that maybe I didn't want a confrontation, or forgiveness, or custody, or even the house. No. What I wanted was silence. Silence from them. But never for them. Because the loudest punishment in the world is the sound of your own footsteps, echoing through a house you no longer own. The next morning, she sent the girls to school in silence. I know because I was parked at the end of the block again, 2 rows behind the rust-colored Subaru with the busted taillight. Watching. Not hiding. Not creeping. I wanted her to see the possibility of me. I wanted her to start second-guessing every parked car. Every pedestrian. Every window with the blinds just slightly open. She stood on the porch for a full 2 minutes after the school bus pulled away, hugging herself like she'd stepped into a breeze only she could feel. She didn't check her phone. Didn't call. Just stood there, eyes scanning the street like she expected something to crawl out of the sidewalk. And still, nothing about him. It fascinated me. Her silence on the topic. Like she believed she could quarantine the affair from the fallout. As if there was still a version of this where she came out clean on the other side. That told me everything I needed. So I opened phase 2. At 10:41 a.m., Dana received a package. Delivered directly to her yoga studio. No return address. Light. Padded. Neatly wrapped in a lavender box with a white bow. Inside? One photograph. Glossy. 5x7. It showed Dana. Sitting across from him. The same man. My wife's ex. Taken 3 weeks ago. Same bar where he and my wife had their birthday drinks back in November. Dana was smiling. Leaning in. A hand touching his wrist. That photo was real. But what made it lethal was the message underneath. He likes familiar faces. But you already knew that, right? I never heard what happened in the studio that day. Didn't need to. But by noon, my wife had called me 6 times in a row, then left a voicemail that started with, "Mark, I need to talk to you, privately. No drama, I swear. Please." and ended with, "I think someone's trying to mess with us." Us. That word again. Like we were still allies. That night, I watched her from the neighbor's side yard. She was outside again, pacing, phone glued to her hand. She wasn't crying anymore. She was pacing like a project manager under a collapsing roof. Controlled panic. The kind of panic you rehearse. At one point, she stood still. Then did something strange. She took off her wedding ring. Not in some grand, dramatic gesture. Just quietly slipped it off and stared at it. Not crying. Not angry. Just thinking. Then she put it back on. That moment, that 5-second indecision, told me she still hadn't figured it out. She didn't know if she'd been caught or framed. Good. Because the next morning, the second package arrived. This time, it was for him. Delivered to his gym. In his locker. Inside? A USB drive. No label. Just a single video file. 6 minutes. Compiled from various home cameras over the past 3 months. Footage of my daughters. Playing. Laughing. Painting on the patio. Eating pancakes. But carefully stitched together in a way that made it feel distant. Cold. Accompanied by a title card at the start. "You're not in this one." I didn't need him to respond. I needed him to feel it. The boundary. That wall between pretending and parenting. Between being welcome and being watched. He didn't message me, but he sure as hell called her. She called Dana 5 minutes after that. And Dana? She called her ex-husband. The one she swore she hadn't seen in years. And now the web was eating itself from the inside. Because that's the thing with people like them. They cheat, they lie, they protect. But the one thing they never do is trust. Not when someone else starts playing the game better than they do. And me? I wasn't playing. I was rewriting the rules. On the 5th day, I stopped watching them. Not because I lost interest, on the contrary. That was the move they wouldn't expect. People like them thrive in the mirror. They panic under observation, sure, but they collapse in silence. So I vanished again. No messages. No sightings. No sign I was still in town. I let them rot in the quiet, marinate in their own suspicions. Because silence doesn't just hurt, it distorts. Without noise, they start turning on each other. And they did. By mid-morning, Dana had already blocked her sister on everything but email. I confirmed it by accessing one of the dummy accounts I'd used years ago to test our Wi-Fi router. Fun fact, most people never reset their admin passwords, especially not Dana. The email thread between them was pure poetry. Passive-aggressive accusations, fake concern, a sudden burst of, "We need to stick together as a family," before it nosedived into, "How long has this been going on?" She still hadn't told Dana I left voluntarily. She told her I stormed out. Claimed I was probably having a breakdown. Even tried to float the theory that I'd been unfaithful first. That's how far gone she was, laying new tracks while the train was already halfway off the bridge. But this time, I didn't push back. I waited. And while I waited, I went shopping. See, there's this thrift bookstore tucked behind a laundromat 2 towns west. Nobody really shops there. The woman who runs it used to be a therapist. Retired early after too many clients started stalking her. I'd helped her out once when her security cameras glitched. She owed me. I asked her for a favor, a very specific book. Hardcover. No dust jacket. Green spine. Blank pages. Not actually a book at all, just a hiding place. Inside it, I placed a single Polaroid. Not a photo I'd taken. One I found buried deep in a junk drawer 6 years ago, long forgotten. My wife and Dana at a New Year's party, both drunk, both dressed as nurses for some reason, with him in the background. Not touching. Not posing. But present. I added one line on the bottom with a Sharpie, a habit, not a mistake. Then I asked the shop owner to make sure my wife saw it next time she came in. "How do you know she'll come?" she asked. "She's already been twice," I said. "She's tracing breadcrumbs." At 3:17 p.m., my wife arrived at the shop. I watched from the laundromat across the lot. She didn't look scared. She looked curious. And that was worse. Curiosity is what makes people dangerous. Fear makes them predictable. Curiosity? That makes them reckless. She left with the book in her hand. And for the first time since I left, she didn't call. Not even once. Instead, he called again. Left a voicemail this time. He was trying to sound casual, but the end of the message cracked in a way that made it clear he wasn't sleeping well. "You got your message across, all right?" He said, "We get it. Just back off. Be smart, man. Be smart." From him. That was the second best part of my day. The best part? The email I received at 11:52 p.m. From a name I hadn't seen in years, Julian Decker. Julian was my former business partner. We parted ways after a failed real estate flip, and he ended up moving out of state. But before that, he helped me set up a shell company. Legit paper trail. Fake offices. Clean tax records. And now? He was asking if I still needed access. Same burner routing system, his message said. I replied with a single word. Yes. Because the final phase wouldn't be about feelings or revenge. It would be about removal. Not from the house. Not from the marriage. But from their own narratives. They thought this was a love triangle. They didn't realize I'd been building a trapdoor under their feet. By the sixth day, the air around them had started to curdle. It wasn't panic anymore, it was calculation. Damage control. I could feel it from miles away. She wasn't trying to undo what she did. She was trying to decide what version of the story she could still sell. To the girls. To Dana. To herself. And most importantly, to me. And that's when I hit her with the thing I'd been saving. I call it the mirror letter. It was handwritten, not typed. Folded precisely 6 times, tucked into a plain white envelope with no stamp, no return address. I left it between the pages of a parenting magazine in her therapist waiting room. I knew she had an appointment that day, recurring, every Thursday, 2:30 p.m. She thought I didn't remember. I remembered everything. The letter wasn't angry. That was the trick. It read like a man doing inventory. Detached. Mildly amused. But every line had teeth. Here's how it started. Dear Claire. Funny thing about reflections. You look long enough, and you start seeing pieces that don't belong to you. A borrowed smile. A rehearsed apology. A script you didn't write but perform anyway. Then I listed facts. Neutral tone. No accusations. Your ex wears a size 11 boot. One tread mark near the garage freezer where the birthday cake went missing. You blamed raccoons. I smiled. Your phone auto-connects to Bluetooth speakers I removed last fall. They played audio from the den at 1:14 a.m. last Tuesday. Laughter. Not yours. Not mine. Your daughter now calls him coach, even though he's never set foot on a field. No rage. Just signals. And the closing line? I'm not hiding. I'm observing. You're not guilty. You're predictable. That's worse. I watched from across the street as she read it in her car, parked just outside the therapist's office. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She folded the letter up, very slowly, then stared into the rearview mirror for a long time, like she was expecting her own reflection to lie to her. And it probably did. Back at home, the fallout had already begun. Dana sent a group message to the extended family, thinly disguised as a concerned update, asking if anyone had heard from me. She slipped in a line about how Claire's been under immense stress since Mark's breakdown. Breakdown. That's what they were calling it now. A man leaving without theatrics, without violence, without demands? It couldn't possibly be logic. It had to be mental collapse. Because people like them can't process quiet consequences. They only recognize screaming and chaos. So I gave them neither. Instead, I gave them doubt. And doubt started eating them. That night, I got another voicemail. This time from her mother. A woman who once told me, in no uncertain terms, that I wasn't expressive enough for Claire. That I held things in too tightly. A woman who always said our girls needed a man who could emote. She didn't sound so poetic now. Mark, honey, I'm not sure what's going on, but Claire is not well. She's saying things that don't make sense. She keeps asking if you're following her, if you've spoken to someone named Julian. Who's Julian? I smiled when I heard that. Julian was back in play. I hadn't even told him what I needed yet. Just confirmed I still had the shell company alive and breathing. And in the meantime, he'd done what Julian always does, stir the pot. Because the next day, a new deed was quietly registered at the county office. To an LLC no one had ever heard of. That LLC? It now owned 49% of the house she was living in. She didn't even realize it yet. But she would. Right around the time I send the second letter. The one that starts with Claire. This time, I borrowed your handwriting. By day 7, Claire wasn't pacing anymore. She was posting. Online. Carefully. Strategically. Little curated fragments of our life. Photos of the girls baking cookies, throwback pictures of our wedding, captions like, "Some things are worth fighting for." Classic misdirection. She was painting over a burning house, hoping the neighbors wouldn't smell the smoke. She even changed her profile picture to one of us smiling at a wine festival. The same one she cropped his face out of last year. I knew exactly what this meant. It meant she was preparing to make me the villain. Not by proof, but by presentation. She wanted to own the narrative before I could. But she forgot one thing. I'd already rewritten the ending. At 3 p.m., I made a deposit. Not money. Something better. A small, linen envelope delivered by a third-party courier. Neutral guy, early 20s, college kid I paid through a freelance gig site. He dropped it off at Claire's office in front of her assistant. Made sure it looked official. Discreet. High stakes. Inside the envelope, a printed form titled Request for Withdrawal of Guardian Rights. Blank. Untouched. Unsubmitted. Except for one thing. A note clipped to the top with a gold paper clip. It read, "Not everything is about custody. Some things are about perception." I knew she'd open it in front of her assistant. Knew it would start the whisper spiral. Knew her boss, a woman who takes HR more seriously than fire drills, would absolutely ask about it by morning. Let her wonder if I was leaving. Let her wonder if I was staying. Let her wonder if she was even still relevant in the decision. But that wasn't the main act. That night, I called her burner phone. Yes, hers. The one she thought she'd hidden in the false bottom of her old makeup bag. The one I found when I replaced the vanity drawer rails 3 months ago and noticed the spacing didn't line up with the screws. I didn't say anything when she answered. She didn't say anything either. We sat in that silence for 7 seconds before she whispered, "What do you want?" I let the silence stretch. Then I said, flat, deliberate, "I read the journal." That was it. Then I hung up. Now here's the thing. There is no journal. At least not yet. But she thinks there is. Because during our 5th anniversary trip to Lake Arrowhead, she scribbled notes in a red notebook every morning, always covering it when I passed. She claimed it was gratitude tracking. 2 years later, I found that notebook in a box labeled Winter Scarves. Empty, which means the real one exists somewhere. And now, she thinks I have it. That night, she called Dana 6 times. Then her ex. Then her boss. I didn't hear the conversations. I didn't need to. Because at 11:18 p.m., I got a text. From an unknown number. Just 2 words. "Please stop." No context. No signature. But I knew who it was. It wasn't Claire. It was him. And that told me something crucial. She wasn't leading the cover-up anymore. He was. Which meant he finally realized something she hadn't. That I hadn't disappeared. I was circling. The 8th day began with rain. Heavy, unpredictable, and loud enough to drown out every excuse she'd rehearsed in her bathroom mirror. I sat in my truck again, not far, parked where I could see the reflection of their kitchen window in the puddles forming along the curb. Water distorts things beautifully. Their home, my home, looked warped, half-melted, like a memory trying to erase itself in real time. At 7:23 a.m., the garage door opened. Not for her car. His. So, he was spending the night now. Interesting. He was careful this time. Didn't use the front door. Carried his shoes instead of wearing them. Even wore a hoodie with the drawstring pulled so tight, he looked like he was preparing for a hurricane. But he made a mistake. He forgot about the dog. Our dog. When he entered, the dog didn't bark. Didn't growl. Just stared at him. And that was the mistake. Because I trained that dog. And he doesn't sit still for strangers. Claire must have fed him in the garage before the door even opened. A signal. A cover. A preemptive erasure of tension. Dogs don't lie. But they can be bribed. Noted. At 10:11 a.m., I moved. Went to a small art supply shop where Claire used to take the girls before birthday parties to make their own cards. I walked in, bought nothing, and slipped something between 2 packs of pressed paper near the register. A drawing. Crayon. Bold colors. Scribbled initials in the corner, MG. My oldest daughter. The drawing was of a house. Our house. But the windows were boarded up with red X's. And the people inside. 3 stick figures. 2 smiling. 1 crying in a corner with no hands. It wasn't real. I drew it myself. traced the lines from an actual card she'd made 3 years ago. I made the coloring uneven on purpose, the way she used to when she was 6 and didn't care about staying inside the lines. I even used the same brand of crayons, those chunky ones she used to grip like weapons. Why? Because Claire would find it. She always checked the craft store's clearance bin for forgotten items. And when she did, she'd assume the worst, that our daughter drew it, that she dropped it, that maybe she left it behind on purpose. Let that image sit in her brain like a loose tooth. By 1:15 p.m., she sent a message to my work email, first time since I left. "Mark, we can go to counseling. We can fix this. I'm done with him." I told him, "Please, come home. Let's talk." But the message was timed perfectly, just 3 hours after he arrived. She was hedging, sending up a flare in case the storm didn't pass. One hand around his shoulder, the other writing me love letters in the dark. That's when I sent my message. From an email she didn't know I still had access to. One we shared years ago for event RSVPs and PDA reminders. I logged in using her birthday and the name of our first cat. Passwords she never updated. She was still logged in on the family tablet. I composed a draft. I didn't send it. I knew she'd check the drafts. Subject line, timeline correction. Message body. November 7th. You said he hadn't been in contact. November 9th. He used your login to access the Dropbox folder we used for taxes. November 11th. He downloaded photos from the folder labeled 2018_summer_family. You told him where to look, and you let him use my digital fingerprint. That wasn't clumsy. That was intentional. I closed the laptop. Waited. 38 minutes later, her shared tablet pinged. She opened the app, opened the draft, didn't delete it, didn't reply, but she logged out. Of everything. All accounts. All shared drives. She even pulled the battery from the old Nest Cam in the hallway, like that was the leak. As if the betrayal lived in the wiring. I sat back and exhaled. Because now, she was finally scared. Not of exposure, but of what else I knew. And meanwhile he started scrubbing. I checked his Instagram, posts disappearing. Then his LinkedIn, job title changed from operations manager to freelance consultant. I gave it 10 hours before he vanished entirely. Cowards always try to delete the scene of the crime before the trial starts. But that's not how this works. You don't get to walk out of the fire clean. You just get to choose whether you're dragging someone with you. Day 9 was quiet. Not just the absence of calls or texts that had already become the norm, but something else. A stillness. Like the entire chessboard had frozen mid-move. Claire didn't post. Dana didn't email. He didn't drive by. Even the group chat with her family, the one I hadn't spoken in since I walked, went dead silent. But silence isn't peace. Silence is planning. So I let it sit. Let them breathe. Let them believe maybe I'd lost interest. Maybe the storm had passed. Maybe I'd taken the bait and was nursing my wounds somewhere off-grid with a dusty bottle and a broken heart. That was the opening I needed. At 10:47 a.m., I went back to the house for the first time. Not through the front. Not even through the back gate. I used the crawl space. 8 years ago, I installed an emergency water shut-off valve under the kitchen, just in case the pipes froze while we were out of town. Claire never cared about the crawl space. Hated it, actually. She called it Spider City. I'd watched her step over the access hatch without even looking. But I remembered it. And I remembered what I stored down there. One box. Sealed in thick plastic. Marked only with a black X. Inside it? Backup drives. Not of her cheating. Not of their messages. I didn't care about that anymore. This was deeper. Financial records. Insurance documents. The original deed before I'd transferred half the house into the LLC. Copies of contracts she never read. Power of attorney forms she'd signed in a rush 3 years ago when her mother was in the hospital. A notary she never bothered to verify. Claire never realized how much paperwork she skimmed, or how much control she'd already handed me. By noon, I had everything loaded into a simple manila folder and stashed in the passenger seat of my truck. That folder wasn't a threat. It was a mirror. I just needed to show it to the right person. So I showed it to Dana. She didn't recognize me at first when I knocked on the glass wall of her office. She worked in a boutique real estate firm at glass walls, cold brew on tap, the kind of place where everyone pretends they don't gossip until someone closes the door. I walked in, handed her the folder, and said 5 words. Claire put you in danger. That's it. Then I walked out. I never looked back, but I know exactly what happened. She opened it immediately. Read just enough to panic. Saw her name listed in a shared liability clause for a home equity line she never signed for. Saw the business card of an actual investigator I once hired. Yes, real, under a sticky note that read, "He thinks you introduced them." She'd have questions. She'd panic. And she'd call Claire. But more importantly, she'd call him. And sure enough, at 4:22 p.m., his car reappeared. Not in the driveway. On the street. Engine running. He stayed inside, eyes fixed on the house like a man waiting for instructions that never came. He didn't knock. Didn't go in. Because something had shifted. Maybe Dana told him something Claire couldn't. Maybe Claire didn't answer. Or maybe, for the first time, he realized this wasn't just a game about desire and secrets. This was about liability. See, men like him are brave in the shadows. But the moment someone turns the lights on and starts passing out copies of the guest list, they start seeing ghosts in every corner. He drove away 20 minutes later. Fast. No lights. At 6:37 p.m., Claire messaged me again. This time, from a different number. I made a mistake. Please don't punish the girls for what I did. They miss you. I read it once. Then read it again. There it was. Not, I'm sorry. Not, I was wrong. Just don't punish the girls. Translation. I finally believe you're capable of something I can't predict. She was right. But not the way she feared. Because I wasn't punishing the girls. I was freeing them. Quietly. Permanently. Piece by piece. One signature at a time. And soon, they'd be the ones asking the same question Claire now whispered into the dark. How much does he know? The better question? How long has he known it? Day 10 was not a storm. It was worse. It was sunny. Clear skies. Bright morning. That cursed kind of weather that tries to trick you into thinking nothing bad could possibly happen. Claire always said she hated rain because it made her feel heavy. I always preferred it. It gave people a reason to look down. But on this particular morning, she wanted people looking up. Smiling. Relaxed. Which is why she threw a brunch. A neighbor's birthday, she claimed. Just a few families. Nothing dramatic. Just trying to normalize. Her word, not mine. I watched it unfold from 3 houses away, perched in the attic of a half-renovated foreclosure. I knew the owner, retired electrician, deaf in one ear, paid in cash. I let myself in through the back, offered to patch some drywall in exchange for keys and privacy. From that attic window, I had full view of the backyard. There she was, Claire, wearing a sundress, laughing a little too loud, pouring orange juice into flutes that didn't contain champagne, hugging people she barely spoke to during the school year, putting on a show. And the girls? Matching outfits. Distracted, not unhappy, but visibly confused. They kept looking around, expecting someone. Not him. Me. I hadn't seen them in 10 days. 10 full rotations of Earth. And yet they stood there like I had just stepped into the next room to grab a snack. That did something to me. Not rage. Not pain. Focus. At 11:12 a.m., she checked her phone. Paused. Looked around. Smiled wider, like someone told a joke only she could hear. That's when I knew. She thought this was the end of it. That the lack of noise meant surrender. That I'd retreated. That silence meant she'd won. The brunch wasn't just a cover, it was a victory lap. She even posted a photo an hour later, her and the girls in front of the patio table, smiling. Caption, 1 day at a time. Healing together. Healing. As if I'd wounded them. As if my absence was the violence. I didn't reply. Not publicly. That wasn't the move. Not yet. Instead, I sent an email to her boss. Not long. Not angry. Just specific. Subject, employee disclosure, time sensitive. Attached was a redacted copy of the folder Dana had received. But I swapped out the liability page for something else, a scanned letter of acknowledgement signed by Claire 3 years ago. It was a form required by her company's ethics policy, one she signed affirming she would report any personal relationships with clients or vendors. Guess who qualified as both? Her ex had done contract work for her firm twice. Small-time logistics stuff. He'd been paid through a third-party vendor, but the connection was traceable. I found the invoice buried in a joint email folder she never deleted, attached to an automated reply. That signature on that form meant she'd violated corporate policy. Not criminal, not career-ending, but visible. Enough to trigger a review. Enough to raise eyebrows. Enough to tilt her world by 3 degrees, which is all I ever needed. Because while she was clinking glasses with PDA moms and playing the martyr, her phone buzzed again. This time, not from me, but from HR. And Claire? She froze. Just for a second. Enough that one of her friends noticed and leaned in to ask if she was okay. She nodded, then turned, walked inside the house, and didn't come back out for 17 minutes. That evening, she sent me a single text. One word. Please. I didn't respond. Instead, I called Julian. Told him it was time. We finalized the LLC ownership shift. Refiled the documents. Submitted one final piece, the motion to freeze shared equity based on partner instability. Perfectly legal. Quiet. Deliberate. And now? She couldn't sell. She couldn't borrow. She couldn't leave. The house was no longer an escape route. It was a glass box. And in 2 days, she'd receive the final key. Not to unlock it. To see it. Because the story wasn't ending. It was finally about to begin. It arrived at noon. A small white envelope, hand-delivered to Claire's door by a courier wearing a mechanic's jumpsuit and sunglasses. Not because he needed to be discreet, but because I wanted her to wonder. She opened it while standing barefoot in the hallway. The cameras I installed, years ago, tucked into the light fixture during a remodel, still fed silently into a local server she'd never found. She looked tired. Not guilty tired. Cornered tired. Like a raccoon that just realized the trash can lid wasn't loose anymore. Inside the envelope was a single item. A key. Old. Bronze. Heavier than it looked. Taped to a card that read, "It opens the drawer in the den. You told the girls it was jammed." She froze. Because it was jammed. On purpose. I'd altered the rails years ago, wedged a strip of balsa wood behind them. Just enough to stop her from opening it without breaking it. Now she had the key. And a choice. She stood there for a long time. Then walked to the den. Slowly. She didn't call me. Didn't scream. Just unlocked the drawer. Inside? A red leather-bound notebook. The journal. But not hers. Mine. 6 months' worth of entries. Clean handwriting. Dated. Documented. Page after page of surgical details. Her calls, her lies, receipts, quotes, cross-reference statements from the girls, notes about him. But what made it deadly wasn't the contents. It was the final page. A taped photograph. Of him. In their bedroom. Wearing one of my shirts. Holding one of my daughter's drawings. With a message underneath. You didn't just invite him into our bed. You invited him into their memories. And under that, a line in my handwriting. You don't raise daughters in a lie and expect them not to learn how to pretend. The moment she saw it, Claire sat down on the floor. Folded over. And that's when the house phone rang. Not her cell. The house line. The one we kept for emergencies. The one only 6 people ever used. The one we told the girls was just in case Daddy ever needed to reach us from somewhere far away. She picked it up. Didn't speak. And I didn't ask if she was there. I already knew. I said, "This isn't revenge, Claire. This is preservation. I gave you 10 days. 10 steps. 10 chances. You thought it was a countdown to punishment. But it wasn't. It was a countdown to irrelevance." She didn't cry. She asked one question. "What happens now?" And I answered, gently, like I was tucking in the final corner of a bedsheet. "You move around the house you fought to keep, and realize you don't live in it anymore. You just exist in it." Then I hung up. And 30 minutes later, he finally showed up again. Sweaty. Nervous. Not driving his car or hers. He walked in without knocking. Stayed for exactly 13 minutes. When he walked out, he wasn't shouting. Wasn't angry. He looked like a man who'd been handed a mirror and a receipt. And when he opened the driver's side door, a folded slip of paper fell from the dash. It read, "You were a prop. Nothing more. Exit stage left." He didn't pick it up. He just drove away. And Claire? Claire didn't follow. Because she finally understood. The real man was never the one who stayed in the house. It was the one who designed the exit. Day 12 didn't end with a bang. It didn't need to. It ended with quiet, and everything broken in the exact shape I intended. That morning, a black SUV pulled into the driveway. Not his. A rental. Out stepped a woman in a blazer too stiff for comfort and a clipboard too thin for kindness. Claire opened the door wearing the same robe she used to wrap around herself on Sunday mornings when she'd read those How to Reset Your Life blogs and pretend she hadn't just lied to me the night before. They didn't speak long. The woman left a pamphlet. Claire nodded, numb, pretending to process. I knew what the pamphlet said. I requested it. It was titled, Cooperative Family Mediation, when parental authority is in dispute. No court, no threats, just a formal notice that the custody agreement would no longer be informal. I wasn't asking to come back. I was redefining what it meant to be gone. At 1:12 p.m., Claire sent me a video, just under a minute long. Our daughters, sitting on the couch. No makeup, no matching outfits, no script, just them, holding a sign that said, "We miss you." I watched it once, then deleted it, because that's what they do now. Send messages through symbols. Like I hadn't been doing that for 12 straight days. Like I didn't invent that language. But the final piece wasn't a letter, or a threat, or a leak. It was a sale, a quiet one. The LLC Julian and I set up had slowly been absorbing assets, just enough to fly under radar, but wide enough to encircle. Claire thought she owned half of everything. In reality, she owned half of what I left visible. The rest? Held under trusts, extensions, dummy holding firms. All filed. All clean. That afternoon, she received a notification. Not from me. From a real estate alert. The neighboring lot, the one she joked about buying someday to build her yoga studio, had just sold. To the LLC. She called me. I let it ring. Then she sent a message. So what now? You own my house, my street, my life? Is that the goal? And I answered, for the first time in 3 days. No. You own all of it. I just stopped pretending that made you powerful. That night, she packed a suitcase. No yelling. No ceremony. She left the girls with her sister and got into the rental. She didn't drive to a hotel. She drove to his place, where his porch light was off, where he didn't open the door. She waited outside for 20 minutes, then left. No home, no lover, no audience. Just her, in the driver's seat, staring at a dashboard that wouldn't give her answers. And as for me, I didn't go back. I didn't need to. The house was never the point. The house was just the stage. And I'd already taken the script, the spotlight, and the exits with me. The girls? They'll be okay. I've already arranged the new custody terms. Neutral ground. Familiar routines. Nothing dramatic. Just clarity. They'll see me every weekend. And more importantly, they'll start to see her. Not the version she performs, but the version that shows up once the music stops. Because the truth isn't in what people do when they're guilty. It's what they do when no one's watching. And now, everyone's watching. Just not me. Not anymore.